You like that banjo, don't you, Mississippi State? You like that, don't you? Being a Tennessee Vols fan is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you, and you don't even remember a time where it hurt you once in your life. And this is the Volatile Podcast. My name is Mac Williams. I'm here with my good friends, Jeff Wright and Nick Duncan. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Dude, riding high, feeling good about pulling out the broom against Mississippi State. And we have a basketball team, and so we still don't have a quarterback. So I do remember a little hurt, but I am feeling good.
Is it April Fool's Day? What day of April is it? I think I'm in a time machine.
Dude, we're riding high in April. We got shot down in March, and we're riding high in April.
Boys, the balm of one good baseball series has to stretch quite a distance right now. So, hey, perfect intro, Mac. By the way,
thank you.
And shout out to Joe Davis, who has welcomed a new child into the world. What a king!
Shout out to Joe.
Thoughts and prayers to him and his lovely wife as she recovers, and just super excited for them.
Well done, Joe's wife.
Yeah. I thought obviously that's a perfect intro after sweeping Mississippi State, but I figure we might as well just tell the story for our listener while we're here, since they weren't privileged. So last year we went to the Mississippi State game, Tennessee versus Mississippi State in Starkville. And obviously, all you faithful listeners out there know that was a grueling game, a real grind, overtime win for the Vols. We were real excited. Fun to be there. Starkville was a great environment. After the game, in just beautifully antagonizing fashion, we drove around with Rocky Top blaring on repeat with
Van
Door open on Jeff's Ford Transit, and we are just blaring Rocky Top for the entire campus to hear. And our good friend and fellow host, Joe Davis, was screaming at the top of his lungs to everyone that could hear him, everyone that would listen. You like that banjo, don't you, Mississippi State?
To which there's just raucous laughter from the rest of the van. Like, what is happening? It was perfect. I wouldn't have changed one thing about it.
We met a fellow Vol fan doing that, and Mac pulled a gun on him.
A Vols fan got out of his car in a traffic jam to come like high five us, and Mac thought it was some mad Mississippi State fan, so he's reaching for his piece. He's like, "Oh my gosh, here we go! It's going down."
Hey, I was ready to defend the family, baby. I was ready to defend the family. I would have died right there in Starkville. Yeah, I was ready, man. I was ready. I was prepared. I knew we might die, and I was fine with it, so.
The maddest human being we've ever seen on a Vols trip, which, listener, this is all kind of for us, but we just haven't watched a lot of road games that we won. And the maddest human being was a Mississippi State sorority girl who gave us sign language
she was very
the whole way.
She did not like the banjo. She did not like it.
She did deep down. She's suppressing the truth.
She was surprised. That's why she was actually so angry.
Yep.
Yeah, that poor girl. She had a splint on her finger. Did y'all notice that? She had one finger that just stayed vertical the entire time.
As much as I saw it, I should be fully acquainted with
it. Poor girl broke her finger at the game, I guess. Had to get a splint from
that's rough.
Face.
And she had to watch Deshaun Bishop destroy her hopes and dreams in overtime. It was just a double whammy.
Oh, golly. Ooh, that was a good start. All right, well, let's get into it. We got a lot of latest news tonight. Let's start with football. So football, orange and white game was this past Saturday. Some information gleaned about quarterbacks potentially. We'll jump into that later. Was there any other position groups you guys think that we should talk about from the orange and white game? Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank Danny White for the lack of information we have about the game. Although video streaming has existed for hundreds of years at this point, and we have multiple channels that could display the game, for some reason, Vols fans didn't get to watch the orange and white game unless they attended. So thanks, Danny. I appreciate you, man.
I mean, was it even a game?
No. Not like it was when we were kids, They did more like, it really is more like a practice now. They do like drills and they'll do like their stretching warm up stuff. And you kind of just watch like a practice basically. And the scrimmages are more like, like just a little, like they just run a few plays here and there, different situations, whatnot. So I read the final score was 13-10 though. I don't even know. I don't know.
So. Yeah, the way they shuffle rosters, that's kind of meaningless, right? I mean,
right.
Yep.
Yeah,
it feels like the orange and white game is it feels like the spring games are meaningless. I don't think that's just true for Tennessee. I think that's just generally true of college football now.
Yeah.
Right, and I get it. That's the dichotomy, though, that always frustrates me about this administration. They want you to care enough to show up. They want you to care enough to buy the concessions in the stands. They want you to care enough for all that. And you're supposed to just take complete silence and be happy with it. Cool, guys. That's cool. That's fun.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this.
But Danny White did say that the women's basketball program is in great shape. So he said that today. I mean, he said Kim Caldwell's got him on a good path. So I don't know what you want from him, man.
If that's a good path, I mean, dear Lord, we have fallen far, because you do know that Pat Summitt won like 8 national titles at Tennessee, right? So, I mean, goodness gracious. I just want to move on from that. That is, I don't even like. That is disgusting. That is just egregious behavior from Danny White. I can't even. Oh, I'm just reeling. I can't stop thinking about it now.
Hey, the clearest mark of a good leader is knowing how to respond from failures, and doubling down is always the right choice.
Oh my goodness.
He guys, legitimately, I won't beat this drum too long. You know how we were like, man, he hired Josh Heupel. Is Josh Heupel ready for the SEC? True story. Danny White was not ready for the SEC. He's out of his depth.
Yeah, Josh Heupel was much more ready than Danny White was.
Yep.
Jeez. Yeah. This is now off topic, but I was going to say just about the orange and white game. The last time I remember the orange and white game being like must see TV, or like wanted to see it, was sadly 2009 when Lane Kiffin had come into town and we had Bryce Brown. I remember thinking like, man, this is going to be awesome to see this guy play. And I haven't been excited about an orange and white game since then, I don't think.
Yeah, that Bryce Brown thing is a wonderful part of Tennessee lore, because he shows up last minute. He's supposed to be like a demigod on the field.
He's the highest ranked recruit still that we've ever had.
Yeah, and he basically does nothing in college and then becomes a pretty good NFL player. That's just unreal.
Would David Gabriel Georges, assuming that we actually do sign him and get him to campus, would he be higher ranked than, because he's the number 1 running back overall, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look on 247 or something. And it probably depends on which site you're looking at too. But
yeah,
it's a big if also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it, but we'll talk about that another time. Okay, all right, let's move on. So other latest news, basketball, tons of latest news in basketball. Vols have secured commitments from Day-Day Ames, Tyler Lundblade, Miles Rubin, and Jalen Harrelson. So we'll talk about each of those guys, kind of what we've seen so far, what we know, where those guys are from, things like that. In addition, it's rumoring right now that sounds like Tennessee is in a pretty good position to land Juke Harris from Wake Forest, which I think Jeff kind of knows the most about him. And so we'll talk about that later. And the last bit of new basketball news is that our second, I guess, so the first news we got from guys transferring out was JP Estrella is at Michigan. Is that correct? He committed to Michigan.
That's
and
right.
Then Jalen Carey, that this is more latest news, more recent, commits to Missouri. So those two guys have found a landing spot. Has anybody else found a landing spot, guys?
It's been rumored that Bishop Boswell's heading towards NC State.
He actually
that's right.
He did sign today, and his aide announced Alabama. I mean, that was the rumor.
That was the rumor, right?
Yeah, that was the rumor, but I hadn't heard.
Dude, oh gosh, he will just be dead to me forever.
Yeah.
It's the most like Tennessee thing ever for the guy that's your guy on your team to leave and go to Alabama. And then it's the most Tennessee thing ever for the guy that Jeff and Joe trashed all year long to go to Mississippi State, who's going to absolutely cook us next season.
Missouri. Missouri.
Sorry, what did I say?
Mississippi State.
Sorry, I had the Bishop Boswell in my head, I guess. But yeah,
hey, Mississippi State's fresh on the brain, baby. Fresh on the brain.
Yeah, sorry.
Jalen Carey sucks. You should not have any fear about him.
Jalen Carey does not suck. I don't have to hear about him.
You heard it here on Tax Day 2026. Jeff Rice said that this man would not cook us, like he's already done once, by the way, when he was at Vanderbilt.
Here's the thing. If Jalen Carey has 30 and 30, he goes for an unreal double-double, his team's going to lose.
Hope so.
That's how he works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to pick us to lose to Missouri anyways. You know, I'm not scared, but I don't think he sucks.
I would 100% put on the blackboard, let Jalen do what he wants, and you just stop everybody else. Let him have a career night and then go home winning by 12.
Yeah, that's a recipe for success for sure. For sure. And last bit of latest news here, baseball. Incredible weekend and week so far for the Vols. The Vols have won 4 straight games. They swept Mississippi State over the weekend, and they got a midweek run rule victory over UNC Asheville. About as good as it gets. About as good as it gets for the last 4 games for the Vols. So we're going to enjoy talking about that at the end of the show. Let's jump into football, guys. So orange and white game. Nick, why don't you lead us off? Takeaways, orange and white game.
Do not care. Have no takeaways. I mean, I've already mentioned this a little bit. I guess the one takeaway, here's my problem. Let me explain my problem with it instead of telling you my takeaway.
This is volatile.
The one takeaway is, allegedly, I'm supposed to believe that the defense is actually not going to take 2 years, that they're actually way ahead, and they're going to be awesome. But one, defense is always ahead. And two, like, how many times as a Tennessee fan have you heard a thing coming out of spring practice that's just not true at all? Like, never materializes into anything profitable in the summer or fall. So
it'll be a big year for Ethan Davis, boys.
I have intentionally tried not to hear a lot, get hyped up, believe a lot, because I just don't think you learn a lot from spring. And so I don't really have takeaways. But if you're supposed to have one, it sounds like you're supposed to believe the defense is going to be awesome.
And another point that you neglected to mention is, don't forget, this defense was playing against our vaunted offense from last year. So of course they look great. You know, why wouldn't they look great?
I remember how good that O-line was last year. So
out of my brain, dude.
I just don't have takeaways. I don't think we're going to be very good. So
yeah. Jeff, I know you have some opinions or ideas about the quarterback situation. There's been a little bit of talk about that coming out. Where are you at with the quarterback situation, Jeff?
Well, you know the old cliche. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. And since I couldn't watch the game, thanks again, Danny White, I watched as many clips as I possibly could. And you know what I saw? We don't have a quarterback. Faison had the highlights running, right? Running against a defense that's probably told not to knock him down. And everything else I heard from the people who could attend was nobody can hit a deep ball. Staub was the only one who connected on a deep shot. You know, they showed a few completions of both players, and the completions were to the sideline. And
checking the ball down.
Yeah. Somebody said one of them was doing pretty good across the middle. None of that showed up on my Twitter timeline. And so I just think we're in real trouble when it comes to quarterback this year. Did y'all listen to
which means we're just in real trouble.
Yeah, we're just in real trouble.
Right.
Did y'all listen to the VolQuest episode, this most recent one?
Yes.
Eric Kane, I think it was on that one. He said that Bo Pribula wanted in, and Tennessee turned him down. And that was encouraging. I was glad to hear that. But I think right now, I'm prone to feel validated, but right now I think I'm pretty validated in the way I read Josh's behavior in the offseason. He didn't have a quarterback. Pribula wasn't anything better than what he had, and I don't think that says anything about what he had. They were desperate to get Sam Levitt. The only thing that's weird to me now is that they didn't incentivize Joey to appeal the legal ruling in Knoxville. That's the one thing that I can't understand. But I think as it stands today, based on what we can know empirically from clips, the hope is that the defense actually is, it's not going to be like Dylan. What was the year Dylan Sampson had such a good year in our defense? We went to
24.
It's not going to be 24 level defense. But if you have like a pocket version of that and the two running backs, which apparently are pretty talented, can carry the ball, we're back to Joe Davis's favorite form of football. We run the ball, we play defense, and see if you can get 8 wins in the SEC.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
this is why the betting line is 7.5 games.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're probably going to win 7 or 8 games.
And that seems very real. That seems right.
Yeah. No, I agree. That was one reason I asked kind of in the latest news section if there was anything else y'all heard, because I felt like the running backs looked maybe better than I expected. And that was, other than Deshaun Bishop, of course, like I expect him to be really good and get probably at least 75% of the carries, if not upper 80s. And I felt like the Gordon kid looked really good. He had a really nice run in that game. Again, I don't know how much you can actually take from this, but he I think it's easier with a guy that's like running, right? A running back. You can see, like, is he fast? Is he agile? Is he shifty, right? And the Gordon kid seemed to have a lot of the tools that we've come to know and be familiar with guys like Deshaun Bishop, Alvin Kamara, Dylan Sampson, people like that. He seemed like he was good at catching the ball, seemed like he was quick on his feet, made quick moves, things like that. So I was glad to see that, at least another guy on the team that you felt confident about coming out of the game other than Deshaun Bishop.
I've heard lots of beat writers talk about him too, that he looked really motivated and was playing well. The only downside to that, I'm trying to check my negativity, but the clip that is so great is that he basically ran through a guy. And I know I heard Eric Kane say somewhere that guy would have normally been a walk-on if they hadn't changed the scholarship deal. So this is probably a walk-on level defender that he ran through, but I'll take it.
Yep.
I'll take
it. It's just confirming my thing that it's just like spring doesn't matter. Like everything you see can be masked by so many different variables.
Sure.
Like, and it's just hard to know what's real. So it always just feels like I get hyped up about particular things or players that doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
So I would say, is on a note of humor, y'all heard me earlier talking about how Ethan Davis is like the constant. This is going to be his year, I have 100% heard beat writers talking about Deshaun Brame that way. That, like Ethan has kind of phased out of that, and the next version is going to be Deshaun Brame. So he's going to have a great year too, guys.
Ethan Davis was a good player last year. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know what you want from him. Like, what
he was better than Kitzelman, and I hate to say that.
Yeah, I know.
Is that an endorsement? Kitzelman? What's the standard? Like Kitzelman 2 years ago, that would have been something. But sure. Kitzelman this year was mid.
Yeah, agreed. But I just don't think a tight end is ever going to be you're not going to, even if you had a guy that's like as talented as Jason Witten walk through the doors at UT, that guy's not going to have a career like Jason Witten because Josh Heupel doesn't run his team like that. That's not how the offense works.
I really don't. Because of the things that I'm negative about, I really don't want to get pigeonholed here. I just thought it was funny about Brame. But I also think that if that's the case, it's just hilarious that Ethan Davis is going to be great, and they're not going to use him in any way that actually is impressive or matters. You know what I mean? That's just it's a catch-22 there, but we have to hear about how great he's going to be.
Here's another thing, and this is just separate from just what I've heard about spring practice. Are you guys concerned about the wide receiver core? Even if the offensive line improves and if somebody can throw the ball?
Well, no. It's the throwing the ball part that I'm most concerned about, but Mike Matthews didn't play in the spring game. You tell me.
Well, and Mike Matthews just was okay last year, and I think Braylon Staley is a good player, but I think it's possible we're underestimating how much we lost with Brazel. And
that's fair.
We're probably going to be running the freshman. What's his name?
TK.
Yeah, TK Keys.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's potential for that offense to be really bad.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think the offense could be really bad without the wide receivers dropping off in any of the things that are under their control.
Sure.
I just don't know how you get the ball to them if your quarterback's two greatest threats are handing the ball or running.
I just don't feel good. Like, other than the running backs, it doesn't feel like there's a thing on offense to be like, I feel really good about this.
Hey, be excited about Deshaun Brain, man. And you got Ethan Davis back.
Bye.
You're sick. You're sick.
Like Mac said, the tight ends don't really matter in this offense unless we're running 12 personnel, which we may be running a lot of 12 personnel.
Yeah, that's true. I
mean, just like
let's maybe not the goal line.
Just catch the ball, right? Like, that's Kitzelman dropped the ball a ton. Van Dorselaer had a few key drops in the season. Like, just catch the ball. We don't need you to be great after the catch. You don't even necessarily need your tight ends to be phenomenal blockers in Josh Heupel's offense. You just got to catch the ball when it's thrown to you. Just catch the ball. That's it.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry I've pigeonholed us on this. It just is like an encapsulation of my frustrations with.
No, you're fine, man.
Everybody on that side.
I'm here for all of your black pilling on the offense because I'm in a dark place.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask, Nick, is given what Jeff said, if you have multiple quarterbacks, you don't have one. Given what you've heard, given what you've seen, who would you go with if you were Josh Heupel, based on the information you have now? Who would you go with if the season started tomorrow? Which quarterback are you rolling out there?
Man, I'd probably go with George, just because he's been in the system. He's familiar with the offense, or should be. He's familiar with just the rhythms of Tennessee football and what game day looks like. And so I would go with George. It won't be like the end of the world if they go with Faison in my mind. It seems unlikely that they go with Staub to me, but I guess, if I had to pick today, I'd pick George for that reason.
Jeff, what about you?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you two answers. If I were running a college football franchise on PlayStation, I would go with Faison. The narrative has been that now there's no gap, basically, that they're neck and neck. It's a true quarterback competition, right? And so if that's true, if Faison has overcome whatever deficit he had against McIntyre's experience, which isn't profound because Josh doesn't play his backup quarterbacks, then that means he has accelerated up to McIntyre's level. He's eclipsed that lead. So then that would make you think, then if he's on an acceleration path, you just want to maximize that, right? So if it were no personalities involved, I would go with Faison. And I've been hoping for GMAC the whole time. It will be George McIntyre because they have to give him a chance to see if they can hold on to two quarterbacks, right? To keep two in the system for another year, and let it be pretty clear if they have to pull him that they gave him a shot. Here's the other thing that is different from a franchise. The players on the field with him, with the quarterback, will have an opinion, and they will have a sense of who worked hardest, who made the plays, who puts them in the best position to be successful in the thing that they're trying to monetize. And that's the dynamic. I mean, I just feel really confident George McIntyre will start the season. Could be wrong. I just feel confident in it today. But that dynamic with his teammates is what I'm really interested in. It seemed like Hendon and Milton liked each other so much, there was no room for the team to kind of, other than Jeremy Banks, right, if the rumors are true, who's an idiot, they didn't have room to group up and have their guy versus that guy. And I'm not saying Faison or McIntyre dislike each other.
But it just remains to be seen.
Yeah, and the players will have an opinion. And that's how long you can try the GMAC experiment. However long you think the rest of the team will tolerate it is how long of an audition he gets.
Well, I want to hear what Mac has to say, but before he jumps in, can I also just ask, do you feel like that because the people who were there, like the beat writers and stuff who saw the orange and white game, are definitely saying they're neck and neck? To me, it doesn't even feel like this is just the way I think about spring. This is how jaded I am about spring. I think even if Josh Heupel says okay, that guy's clearly better, he's just not going to name a starter until halfway through the summer.
I think he'll name a starter last practice before game week. Like,
right. So
Well,
like
it'll be the last practice before the week before game week.
yeah, it's usually 2 weeks out.
Brent Hubbs talked about this. He said every year it's come out like basically the same time
Yeah,
because Josh
it's 2
Heupel,
weeks out.
specifically with his coaching strategy, he likes to do a mock game week the week before game week. And so during that week, they will go through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practices, Friday. They'll do everything like they would do on a game week, and therefore the quarterback would have to be named before that week. So it'll be 2 weeks in advance,
okay,
right?
that
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
So to me, like I hear these beat writers all the time say things like this. We've never seen less practice than we do now.
Right.
We don't get to see anything. This orange and white game is probably the most football they've seen of all of spring. And so I just feel like one of those guys could clearly be better than the other, and we just would have no idea.
Yes, and Nick, that's all very reasonable. I'm just having to play with what anybody who has access has said.
Sure.
And they've consistently said no gap, no gap, no gap.
Yep.
And it's a no gap of mediocrity based on what we saw from the orange and white game. And so that's why I'm saying on a franchise, you just go with a guy who has the higher potential rating.
Yeah, I guess if like push come to shove, I would agree with you on that. Like if you're saying both these guys are pretty even, then just go with the guy you think has the higher ceiling in the long term.
Try to accelerate his growth.
Well, I think everybody thinks that probably 8 games is the ceiling this year anyways. So like I don't think anyone thinks Josh Heupel's getting fired if he wins 8 games or probably even 6 or 7 games. So like you're really playing for next year. Unfortunately, I hate going into seasons knowing that.
Me too.
But you're playing for 27. Like 27 is going to be the year where Josh Heupel either stays or goes. Like it's going to be the one that decides.
Remember when we said this about Nico that it'll be his sophomore year, or sorry, his junior year, second year in the system. It's going to be really great.
Yeah. Well, ironically, NIL can buy coaches more time because he looked like such a jerk in that endeavor that you kind of felt like, well, Josh Heupel gets a couple more years,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's true. No, I actually think it's true.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
But it just is rough. I'm trying to trust Josh Pate on this. Josh Pate talked about Josh Heupel the other day, and I think he recently had him on the show. Mac sent that, but I haven't seen that. But he did like 7 or 8 minutes talking about Josh Heupel the other day and just said he's still kind of confident in Heupel and he still thinks he's a good offensive coach and he thinks Tennessee fans should be patient. He thinks 27's a year, which is what I've been thinking in my head. So I'm just trying to trust the plan, boys. I'm just trying to trust the plan.
Man, we're the Cubs. We'll get them next year. We'll get them next year.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
We got to hurry and get the baseball before I find a window to jump out of.
Well, dude, when you were glazing Josh Pate, I was about to call somebody at Mac's house to throw water on him. I knew he was going to get fired up, baby.
Yeah, Josh Pate does excite me. That's for sure. Oh man. Yeah, no, I think both of you guys make good points for both George and Faison. I mean, up until this point, I have been also vocal about I think it should be George. I'd like for it to be George. Right now, based on what we're hearing, I do think Jeff's take of if both quarterbacks are even, you go with Faison is right. Like you guys have already laid out about the higher ceiling. But another thing too that you guys didn't mention, which I know is that you also another factor in that is like who's younger, right? So like Faison is a year younger than George. If all is even if their ceilings were the same, you go with the younger one, because he's got more time, right? You can get not just this year, next year, but you might even get a third year depending on how next year goes. And so I think Faison is the choice from like overall, what's the best long-term move for a coach that's trying to, extend his career and stay at his job and all those things. I think Faison is the right choice, assuming that what we're hearing is true, that it is equal and it's a true quarterback battle, like Jeff said.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's still likely to be George for all the reasons Jeff said. But we've already said this on the podcast before, but I just do not see a scenario in which you get both guys in 27 no matter what. No matter what, you're not going to get both guys. So for me, what that means is if I'm Josh Heupel, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to do what it takes to try and keep both guys because I know I'm probably not going to anyways. And honestly, if I had to guess which guy's more likely to stay if it doesn't work out this year the way he wanted to, I actually think George is more likely to stay than Faison.
Because he loves the program.
Yeah. Right, because he loves the program. And so there's a part of me that's like, well, if it's all equal and you're going to say, well, we're probably going to lose one guy anyways, I think that points towards Faison even more than George.
Hey, let's do it. Let's let George stay, and he can be our Ty Simpson in like 3 years.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the scenario where you kept both is that McIntyre comes out and clearly wins the job and plays well this season. Yeah. And so Faison can be told, like, look, man, he outplayed you, but we think there's a huge future for you. Give him a year. He's going to be draft eligible. Like, that is a small chance that you could keep both of them, but it was the only chance. And I think we're past that window at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I mean, I don't know Faison. We haven't heard him do a ton of interviews. We haven't, haven't got to see him talk or see what his character's about. But like, he just doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's going to be cool with sitting on the bench for a year, even if George does look good. And it does make sense that he started over you. Faison, to me, I'm not meaning to say that he's like a prideful, selfish guy. What I'm saying is I think he's a big-time competitor. That's what I think.
Well, and so like that's just generally par for the course with quarterbacks now. Like, Faison would not be abnormal. He would be abnormal if he stayed.
Right.
Well, any player that thinks they ought to have an opportunity they don't can hit the portal. But Faison was incredibly highly touted, and lots of programs wanted him. It's not – I mean, of course a young man's going to be like, well –
have we had any quarterbacks like that recently?
Well, it's funny you say that, Nick, because I'm thinking back. Like, so go back to the 2023 season. We start Joe the whole year. We go 8-4, 9-4 with the Iowa bowl game win. Like, if you had that season do over again and you didn't know Nico was going to transfer, would you not say that you would have rather just rolled with Nico even back then? Because, like,
yeah, I mean, I think Jeff was saying that, if I remember right.
Right. It's like, I mean, okay, we win 8 games, we win 7 games. Like, unless you're a gambler who has the over, has the under, like, who really cares? If you're not going to make the playoff anyways, I'd rather just get the young guy more experience because we know Heupel's not going to do that, as Jeff's already pointed out, as part of his coaching philosophy throughout the season. We're beating the brakes off of UT Chattanooga. Josh Heupel's not putting George in. So, like, why would I expect if George wins the job for him to do that with Faison, even if the competition's close?
Yeah, he's putting Jake Merklinger in when everyone knew he was leaving.
Right. So it's just like, I think if you had 23 to do it over again, knowing what you know, I would have rather just rolled with Nico and got him a whole extra year. And then now I apply the same logic to Faison. If it really is even, which again, it might not actually be that even. Sure. To your point, Jeff, like, the players might love with George. They might love playing with George. He might be just the best leader in the locker room. Everyone wants to play for him. Everyone thinks he knows the playbook better, runs the offense better, even if he's not as talented. And so everyone might want him to be the quarterback. And if that's true, you got to go with George. It doesn't even really matter whose ceiling's higher, who's older, who's younger. You got to do what's best for the team and what's going to get the guys to play the best. But, unless that's true, then if it's close at all, I think you got to go with Faison.
And they'll start Joe McIntyre. I mean,
And Faison will leave and he'll Probably. Not be very good. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Or he'll be great.
Yeah.
One of the two.
That's an option.
Yeah. Just Faison, if you're going to be great somewhere else, go to somewhere out on the West Coast where we aren't going to go to Iowa or something, or go to Cal or something like that. If you're going to be terrible,
for us to hate watch,
right. Exactly. If you're going to be great though, or if you're going to be bad, please go to Florida or something, please.
Exactly.
That would be awesome. All right. Well, let's move on to basketball. Lots of good stuff to talk about here. We have a lot of new additions, so I'm going to run through all these guys real quick, and then Jeff, I'll turn it over to you, and you just kind of pick one that you want to talk about. So Tennessee has secured commitments from Day-Day Ames, who is a guard from Cal, Tyler Lundblade, who is a guard from Belmont, Miles Rubin, who is a forward from Loyola Chicago, and then Jalen Harrelson, who's from Notre Dame. He's also kind of like a forward, like a wing player, right?
Yes.
The Loyola guy is supposed to be the Okpara swap in.
Right.
And then
everybody else is a guard.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jeff, of these four guys, who stands out to you? Who are you most excited about? Who have you seen play before? Anything?
Yeah. I don't have their names memorized. I kind of have their visual image in my head. What's his name from Belmont?
Lundblade.
Yeah. I mean, if his shooting transfers, it will be something we haven't seen since Dalton Connect in terms of reliability from outside. That will be encouraging. I'll be excited about that. I'm going to kind of cheat here a little bit, though, Mac. You already mentioned it. Right now, which probably means the kid will sign with Florida, Juke Harris is predicted to come to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm really interested in is seeing Juke and Day play together in the backcourt, because they strike me as very similar players. Neither one of them is a true point guard. They're both, I don't want to say dribble heavy, but like they're used to having the ball in their hands to create, and they're good at it. And I just wonder, we've seen Rick Barnes having a remarkable track record with point guards. No criticism for Rick on that front. But this will be the first time that he has two guys who kind of aren't point guards. I thought last year Jacoby and Bishop were kind of similar players. Bishop was just like the Timu version. And Jacoby could run an offense. I think you may very well be about to see a new Rick Barnes scenario where you've got two guys who are used to having the ball, neither of which is like a pass first point guard. And I'm really curious to see how they work together and what Rick does with that.
And another thing to your point, Jeff, like if you're bringing in Juke, which I think you should, Terrence Hill Jr. from VCU, who we haven't mentioned, is also supposed to have started a visit today. And he's also a guard like that, who likes the ball in his hands and who's not like a true point guard, but probably would bring the ball down the court.
In fact,
he also averaged 15 points a game. Like he's right in line with these other guys.
I think it was North Carolina and Michigan that were, if it works out the way we expect it to, we're going to be left at the altar with Juke. He is the guy that I would pivot to and say I got 80% of Juke, and I can kind of, whatever I was looking to strategically, I can get a pretty healthy version of it with him.
Yeah. Nick, is there a different guy that you're excited about?
I mean, probably Day, just because he averages the most points per game, and I would like for us to score more points, if I'm being honest. He also has a little bit higher percentage from the field than the other guys, so that's who I guess I would go with.
Yeah. Jeff, have you seen the Harrelson kid play at all? You're a little bit more tuned into ACC basketball, broad scale. So
just on clips. I didn't watch anything he played last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said he was a guard. I think he's a guy that can go in and out. I think he's like 6'7", so probably more like a forward.
I think he's listed as like a small forward. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be super fascinating, dude. I don't know what Rick Barnes is thinking, and for all my criticisms of him, I fully trust he'll figure this out. But there is a very real scenario where you have the same player in the backcourt and you have the same player on the wings. So Harrelson is kind of a knockoff Nate Ament. And you could have two clones and the Okpara guy and try to figure out how to get every one of them enough touches. And that'd be a great problem to have. It'll just be fascinating to watch.
We're recreating them in the aggregate.
I do feel Jeff, I don't know if you listened. I know you weren't here last week, but I feel a little validated in my, like Mac and I talked about Rick letting Boswell walk. And I kind of feel validated in I think Rick at this point in his career feels like I need guys that already know how to score, and I can teach them how to play defense.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think he's pivoting to I just need a bunch of guys that score 15 points a game, and whichever one plays the best defense is going to get the most playing time.
Okay, I think you're right on that. Here's the other factor for this. on the Rick Barnes retirement watch, all these guys have 1 year of eligibility.
1 year. I noticed that as well.
And I mean, again, I wouldn't fault him. He doesn't have to leave a loaded larder. And they've got that Washington kid they're
not
recruiting.
in this day and age, particularly.
Yeah, they've got that larder. They've got that Washington kid that they will stick in the cupboard. He's a pretty highly touted 4-star. So it's not like he would leave the program in a lurch. But he is creating a scenario where, like, next year I'll build another fresh team, or I step away and it's just a blank canvas, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. Which I'm okay with. I mean, at this point, I would love for Rick Barnes to have in his mind, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to the Final Four.
I'm going to get a Final Four, and I'm going to retire.
Even if that means that we suck the next year, I don't care. Like, I want to go all in for a Final Four.
Totally agree.
For all of my dislike for him that I've expressed, I would love that for him. And it would be great for a program too. And I'm very happy to just say, all right, so you're in a good spot to bring in somebody who'll be.
Especially because even in the NIL era, when Rick has shown that you can just go out and reload and that you can, obviously you're just paying guys basically to come. I think that's attractive to a good basketball coach that can look and be like, okay, it can be done at that program. This dude, if Rick were to make a Final Four, you're saying this guy made 4 Elite Eights in a row and went to a Final Four. And this is obviously a place you can win at the highest level. And I think it looks like a really good opportunity for someone, even if the canvas is Blake roster-wise.
For sure. And even if it's not, Rick gets to decide. I mean, Rick has earned that right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy how, like, now in today's game with NIL and how it's working, it really is like Calipari ball makes so much more sense in this era, even maybe more so than it did in the years past when Calipari was successful at Kentucky. You can really just go get guys for 1 year and go all in and, have NBA type guys on your team for 1 year and try and win every single year and just do it again the next year. You really can do it.
Yep. And particularly in basketball's kind of set up to be that way too. It's like the easiest game you got 5 guys, right? Obviously you got guys coming off the bench, but like, it's just the easiest sport to get a new group of guys and get them to gel quickly.
Yeah.
So
it's also the sport that one guy can actually win you substantial amounts of games on his own. Not to sidebars too much. This is off script, but did y'all see Dalton Connect finally got some minutes for the Lakers?
Oh, that's great. No, I didn't see
it. I say he went off. He scored like 12 points in 15 minutes. He had a bunch of oops. Like he's just playing.
You know what? I didn't see that, but you're saying that reminds me that when I was going into town in Knoxville the other day, I had the sports animal on listening to Eric Ainge, which I haven't done in forever, and he mentioned that. So
nice.
I don't watch the NBA, but I try to keep up with Dalton getting a shot. I think he went to the worst franchise for lots of different reasons I don't want to provoke Mac with. And now that those are kind of out of the way, he looks like a guy that we thought he would be, and I hope somebody trades for him and gets him out of there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see him have a long, good career in the NBA. So
I think he could be an all-star. Honest to goodness, think he could be an all-star. But he's got to get into a franchise that doesn't have arbitrary roadblocks in front of him.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, good for DK. Well, guys, kind of the last basketball note here is talking about Nate Ament. So you guys shared a tweet earlier today with me that Pete Nakos reported that Nate will return to Tennessee if he is not a lottery pick in this year's NBA draft. And so before we kind of jumped on, we were talking about what is defined as a lottery pick. So it's the top 14 picks in the NBA draft. So Nate right now is projected to fall right around the double digit area. So, 8 to 16, somewhere like that. So more than likely, it looks like he would probably be a lottery pick. But Pete Nakos is really just echoing what we've already talked about, which is that we knew, I think everyone kind of knew, and we just talked about it first, that if Nate Ament's not a lottery pick, like he's going to come back because he'd be dumb not to, really, with the amount of money that you can make in college now, especially a player of his caliber. Rick would love to pay him for him to stay at Tennessee. I think Tennessee is a better team no matter who you get in the portal. Tennessee is a better team with Nate on the roster next year. So not breaking news necessarily, but I just want to ask, do you guys think that Nate will be a lottery pick? Yes or no? Jeff, why don't you kick us off?
So I've been digging into this because it's of importance, right? And so it's interesting. The narrative from draft experts is that this is a very deep draft this year. And the narrative is that next year's freshman class is historically bad. And so they're expecting next year's draft to be the kind of thing that like you're just sifting for nuggets among the rubble, right? And that just makes this more interesting to me because I rarely would say this. I don't mean to use too much silent time here, but most often a player who goes to the NBA becomes a better player by virtue of playing to that competition. And that's probably by and large mostly true. But if Nate Ament, as a guy who's physically underdeveloped, ends up on a team who, the way the lottery works is the team with the most distance from the playoffs gets the first pick and you work back, right? So that last lottery pick is the team that was closest to making the playoffs. That tends to mean you're going to a halfway decent team. So you drop Nate into an environment like that where it's going to be tough for him to get minutes. And I really legitimately think if I were talking to Nate, I think this is a really rare scenario where you could be a better player to, another year at Tennessee in a way you wouldn't if you went to a team you're not going to get minutes on in the NBA. And you'll probably be a much higher draft pick because the pool is so much more shallow. If they can get anywhere near the money, I would consider – I think Nate's in a unique position to think this is actually in his best financial interests. Now, the counter to that is it's accepted wisdom in the NBA that you get there as soon as you can because you make your money on your second contract. I don't know how to counterbalance that, except that Dalton Connect is kind of a cautionary tale. You end up in the wrong scenario, and that second contract is not going to – there's going to be nothing to build it on.
Yeah, because so you haven't put enough on tape.
Yeah. And so I really think if Nate were my nephew, I would be talking to him saying, Nate, I actually think this is a super rare scenario where you might ought to come back to Tennessee in your financial interests. And I hope that wins out because there's a lot of pieces there. I don't see how to fit them together like we already talked about. But even as a guy who has coached a little bit of basketball, I would have a blast trying to put that much talent into a configuration that worked. It'd be like having an arsenal and just it's Christmas Day. You just get to play around with different lineups and whatnot. I think that'd be incredibly fun.
Yeah, well, we're pretty sure at this point that Josh Elander's listening to this podcast, so probably Nate Ament is as well. So Nate, you heard it here first, buddy. It's time to come back. Just stay home.
I can't answer your question, Mac. I mean, I talked forever there, and I'm sorry. I don't know if he's coming back or not. I don't know how I would know that. But I think this is a unique situation where it might be in his best interest to come back.
Yeah. Nick, what do you think?
I think Jeff just made a really compelling argument. I'm going to assume no one is making that argument for him, and I'm going to say he'll probably be 10 to 14, and he'll probably go. So
yeah, I think Nate will be a lottery pick, and so I think that he will go. But I do think that all that Jeff just said, I do think there is a huge argument, and that was a big thing coming like as we embarked on the NIL era. That I really believe that this could influence players of higher caliber to stick around in college more than we had seen for a majority of my life. Because you can make comparable money now in college versus, in the NBA. And that's not true in every sport, but in basketball, it definitely is. Like Nate Ament's just going to be another guy on the team. Even if he is a lottery pick, like he's not going to be great. He's not going to probably even be a starter for a while. I mean, I think a great comparison, as Jeff already said, is Dalton Connect, right? Like he's probably going to have a first few years of his career that looks similar to Dalton's, where he's fighting for minutes and the talent's clearly there and he does some good things and there's some good highlight packages, but like he's not going to be the
He's got to
level of
develop.
player.
Yeah.
Right. He's not going to be like, for example, like this guy's not amazing, but like, he's not going to be like a Zion Williamson who a team is like, we're going to build our franchise around this guy. Like Nate Amint's not like that. And so I do think that there is a lot of incentive for him to come back. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Like Nate Ament could be like the first guy drafted, like number 1 overall, if he sticks around a year. Now, obviously, he's going to have to play incredible next year and be double the player he was this year. But it's possible for him if he comes back and continues to develop. Based on what we know about him, his attitude, his competitive makeup, the way he seems to get after it and plays hard for Coach Barnes, like I don't know why he wouldn't want to at least entertain the idea.
Well,
But
it sounds like he is. If Nakos is saying things like that, and I don't know, it just feels like there's been a little buzz. Like, Nate's definitely not declared, and maybe he's gonna stick around, or he's thinking about it. So,
Well,
you got to believe he probably is thinking about that.
Him and Juke both. The big contingency here is they've got to hear back from their draft evaluation.
Right.
That could get Juke too if he got a real high grade or something. I'll just say this, Mac. I think it was non-basketball reasons that kept DK on the bench. The thing with Ament that I think he should be thinking through, and I wish I could tell him this, is the things that will keep you on the bench are just biology. You are just not physically what you need to be, and there's no way to like hustle that out. You know what I mean? So like if you could stay in a strength and conditioning program at Tennessee that's had pretty good luck, and your body can just mature for a year and you play well, I actually think a top 3 pick is enough incentive to say, yeah, I want to give myself a better advantage going into next year's draft. It's life-changing money. I get it. I just think that.
Can you imagine if Juke Harris came to Tennessee and Nate Ament stayed?
Oh, dude. I mean, it'd be something like what Kansas had this year. Kansas was loaded and didn't make much of a return on it. I think Barnes probably could. One other factor to what you said about NIL, Mac. Mm-hmm. It used to be that agents wanted you gone day one because they don't get paid till you get that NFL or that NBA contract. Right. Your agent's making money off your NIL deal now. So maybe it'll work out. Tennessee catches lightning in a bottle. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. We've already kind of said it, but there's no scenario in which there's no scenario that Tennessee is not a better team with Nate Ament on the roster in 2026, 2027. And there's no scenario where Rick Barnes doesn't know that, right? Like I think Tennessee should and will do everything they can to retain him. I'm just hoping that Nate is listening to the right people that can give him honest feedback on, hey, even if you are a lottery pick, and you're drafted 12, 13, you're better off going to staying at college. And I just hope the right people have a voice at the table for him. Let's move on to baseball, guys. Most exciting thing. I'm excited to talk about this. The Volatile Podcast has been on the front lines of correct information for multiple weeks. If you're not listening to us and you care about Tennessee baseball, this is the time to lock in and to subscribe to the Volatile Podcast because we've been on it. And so the Vols swept Mississippi State this weekend. Nick and I talked about baseball last week. We did not predict Tennessee to sweep.
We did not.
What we did say, and this is what needs to be resaid, is that Josh Elander needs to go all in on Friday. And Josh Elander took that to heart. He listened to the boys at the Volatile Podcast, and he went all in on Friday. And the Vols won on Friday night.
Literally said so in the postgame. Said so in the postgame.
He said, we got to win on Fridays. We have to start winning on Fridays, just like we said. And what we also said is that if Tennessee wins Friday,
they're going to play loose.
They're going to be tough to beat on Saturday and Sunday because Tennessee had not won on a Friday night up until this past weekend. And then Tennessee played lights out the whole weekend, really. Friday night was your toughest game. But once you got that, you controlled Saturday with a 6-2 win and Sunday with a 7-2 win to finish off the sweep. So, Nick, let's go to you, just since we talked about this last week. The Vols only need 6 more wins to guarantee themselves the postseason based on the numbers we kind of ran last week. This is not a position we expected to be in. We were expecting to be looking at 8 or 7 at best. But you only have 6 wins you got to get now. So, Nick, how are you feeling after this weekend in regards to the postseason?
I'm feeling like it's a lock.
Let's go.
I'm feeling like it's an absolute lock.
God bless y'all. I love y'all.
Like it's an absolute lock. Boys, we might be here 2 weeks from now saying we're in.
There's no doubt about it. Nick is ready to get hurt again.
It's a lock. They let them boys wake up. They're cooked.
Yeah.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears. I mean, that'd be wonderful.
So, Jeff, as someone who wasn't here, but I know you listened to us, how did you feel about Nick kind of laying out that scenario of like, Tennessee needs 9 wins the last 18 SEC games. They already got 3 of them. Did you agree with that kind of, scenario Nick laid out? And then now that we've got 3 wins, how do you feel about it?
Well, I feel like I have nothing to offer and you guys are oracles. I thought they were going to get swept. Nick and I went to breakfast this week and I asked him, like, how does them winning on Friday reshape this thing? And he explained it to me, sounded very credible. So all I really want to do is hear from y'all. Y'all know it better. You're on a hot streak. And while I do worry about my friend Nick getting his heart lopped off,
there's no fear, boys.
I hope you're right. I just want it to go that way.
Yeah.
There's no fear. We're about to own the state of Mississippi by this time next week. They're just going to cede the whole state to us.
Let's
They're going to be
go.
like, please take it. Please just, we don't know what we're doing.
It's now West Memphis. Arkansas doesn't get to keep that title.
Yeah, we'll counter by saying, we'll not take Mississippi. We will let you have Memphis.
Yeah. Or we just swap.
And we'll allow you to live and keep your baseball programs.
Nick turned me on to a Tennessee history podcast that made the point that because the river is the margin, every now and then when the Mississippi River changes course, it like cuts off
the border changes. Yeah.
And so we just cut off Memphis and take Mississippi. And it's like, okay, it's just clean swap.
Oh goodness. So Nick, after the sweep, let's get into the details. Like, what were your biggest takeaways from the team this weekend?
Hitting with 2 outs. Simple as that. Hitting with 2 outs, got guy on first and third, 2 outs for weeks has been a death sentence. Someone's gonna pop up. They're gonna go up there and just hack at everything. And it was just situation after situation where they had guys in scoring position, 2 outs, and somebody come up with a big hit. I mean, of particular note, like Levi Clark, who has been abysmal at the plate, like sub 200 for weeks. Came up with 2 guys in scoring position and took one was patient, waited on a pitch, took it opposite field, hit it down the right field line, and scored 2 guys. And I was like, if Levi Clark starts doing that, then there's just no one in the country that we cannot beat. So,
Yep. I mean, this team, we talked about it a little bit last week, but this team that I think it's obvious. The talent is there. They've been right there in every game, even the losses, even the horrible way that you've lost to LSU and to Vanderbilt and the Friday night. I mean, the Friday night game against Missouri is the one outlier, right? But other than that, every single game, the Georgia games, like, you've been right there. And the only difference, I think, to your point, Nick, the biggest takeaway from the weekend, the only difference between this weekend and those past weekends is you got it done when you needed to at the plate. You hit the ball, you drove in runs when guys were on base, and you didn't leave them stranded. And that was the biggest difference. I think, obviously, another takeaway that we could mention that's worth mentioning is the bullpen looked marginally better, especially, obviously, Friday night, Cam Appenzeller coming in on Friday. Thank you, Josh Elander, for throwing Cam on Friday.
That's my takeaway for the bullpen is just that it was better managed for this team.
Yes, it was better managed. Like, you have to win Fridays. We've been saying it. It still applies this weekend. You've got Ole Miss coming to town. You got to go all in on Friday, especially now that you're 1 or 2 games ahead of where you thought you'd be. if Tennessee loses the series this weekend, as long as you can win Friday, you're still in an okay position.
You're still in a good position. Yeah.
And you're still in a good position to potentially sneak out a win on Saturday or Sunday, but you got to go get it done on Friday. And so I was really pleased with how the bullpen pitched. Broadly speaking, I still think there's room to grow, and I still see things that is evident. The bullpen's, like you said last week, Nick, not as good as we thought they would be or had hoped they would be. But if you can get the Friday win by throwing your best arms, then the rest of the weekend just really doesn't really matter.
This last weekend was the perfect scenario because the two guys you feel good about coming out of the bullpen are Appenzeller and Arvidsson. And you threw four guys the first two games. You threw your two normal starters that you would throw, and you threw those two guys.
Two best relievers, yep.
And if you can mimic that most weekends, you're going to win most series.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing, too, I mean, not just the two out hitting, the situational hitting, but like on Sunday, it felt like the entire team hit better across the board. And that's going to be true. We've already kind of talked about this. Like, you're going to score more runs on Sundays, more likely than not, because you're seeing most of the time the worst of the three starting arms from every team. You're seeing what they've got left in the bullpen.
Deep in the bullpen.
Right. And so if you can win Friday, you have a chance on Sunday. Even if you don't pitch well, you can win on Sunday.
And it helps your bullpen. Like, you're also throwing guys in out of the bullpen on Sunday that are not your best guys. And they're able to just go in there and try to throw strikes, pitch to contact a little bit. Like, let's just find outs. If they hit a home run here or there, solo shot, it's not the end of the world because you've scored 5, 6, 7 runs. So you have more margin. And I just think it helps those guys be more confident when they get up there. And I think you saw that. I think all of that, what we just said, you saw all weekend. It was perfectly planned. That's exactly the way this team should be playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy listening to you guys gush. I do have a follow-up. Did y'all watch the midweek game?
I watched the highlights via Wheels.
Okay.
Shout out Wheels.
So because you guys have been talking about how the pitching isn't up to snuff, I was curious. Brown pitched, right?
Yes, he
first
started.
Inning.
How did he look? Oh, he only made an inning. So how did he look?
It was pre-planned. They'd said before the game he's going to throw an inning.
Okay. Because what I'm really curious about is if there's any depth he represents at any point in the season that might kind of not fix the bullpen. I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah.
But could he give them another option?
That's clearly why they wanted to throw him, I think. And, he threw strikes, and he was throwing in the low 90s. UNC Asheville, is really bad. They're really bad. So it's hard to, super know, but he threw strikes and he threw hard. I didn't really – because I was watching it on highlights, I didn't get to see all his pitches, so Mac may have a better take on that. But, I didn't see anything that I was like, oh, this is bad. So,
yeah, I think the risk with Blaine Brown, which I'm going to elaborate on this because it may not actually be a risk, but I think the risk with Blaine Brown and potentially using him in like a relief scenario in the weekend is that you don't want to mess up not only whatever he might be doing at the plate, but you also don't want to mess up, potential defensive alignment. So when you're moving a position player to the mound and then back to a position, it's going to require good management of the roster, right? So I obviously believe that Elander should be okay to do that. I think he is fine to do that. But there have been enough things that happened this year where you're like, is he actually as good as he should be as a head coach at managing the lineup, managing the roster? And so there's some question marks there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Elander doesn't go down that route until he absolutely has to, just because he doesn't want to put that unnecessary pressure on Blaine to also be pitching and trying to still hit, or on himself on how to manage the lineup when that happens. But as Nick said, I think the reason why he started again in a midweek for the first time in a few weeks is because they're trying to get another lefty arm out of the bullpen. They need another one. And so I think that Elander would love for it to be Blaine Brown. Since he's already in the lineup, since he's already hitting, you wouldn't have to, burn a pitcher for him. You can just bring him in and pull him right back and put him right back in left field. But I could see that being something where Elander treads carefully. But the caveat that I have to that, and the reason why I said it might not be a risk actually, is because frankly, it's not like Blaine Brown is hitting that well anyways.
I was going to ask. I thought my perception was that he was in like the 200s with a batting average.
Yeah, right. So he's had a couple big hits and timely hits, but as far as like when you look at the entirety of what he's done, he's not paced home runs as much as you thought he would. He's not hit for average as well as you thought he would. I mean, he's gotten moved out of like the 2-3 hole that he started out in the season. He's hitting like 6 now. And I think that's okay. I don't think it necessarily means a guy is like not performing. But in his case, I think it's evident that Elander would love to have him hitting in the first inning guaranteed, but he's just not performed at a level that you can do that. And so, to me, if we get into I think it's situational. So I think if we get into a game where we're playing Ole Miss and we have a little lead, and you're trying to hold on to a series win, right? You've already won Friday night, maybe it's Saturday, maybe it's Sunday, and you're trying to get a series win. I have no problem with Elander trying to put Blaine Brown in there and just seeing if maybe he can rise to the occasion of, I'm getting an opportunity to pitch in an SEC game. And if he is a good competitor, which it seems like he is, I mean, it seems like he's one of those guys that, would respond well to a big moment, though he hasn't thus far, then I have no problem with Elander trying it and just seeing what happens, especially because your bullpen hasn't been great anyways. But I just don't know that Elander is going to do that. I personally have no problem with it, and I honestly wish he would, especially, like I said, situationally, if it makes sense. Like you have a lead you're trying to preserve, but I just don't know that he's going to do it.
Appreciate the answer.
Yeah. Nick, do you agree with that, or
yeah? No, I think that's right. When you said I think it's situational, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, I think it just depends on how it plays out. The exact scenario I was thinking of before you even started talking about that is a Sunday game where you got to throw a left-handed guy, and maybe you don't want to, like, is Rudy throwing, and can you flip Rudy and Blaine for one batter and keep Rudy in the game?
Right.
I think that's a really unique way you can manage a bullpen. I just think they have to, I just think they all have to really know that, this is a thing we might try if we get in this situation.
Yeah.
So
if you're losing, there's never a time where you should be putting Blaine Brown in. I don't think this far.
I agree.
But like I said, if you're winning and you've got it's an important game, like you're trying to win the series or you're trying to sweep a series or something like that, I have no problem with Blaine Brown going in and seeing what happens. So we'll see. So, Vols hosts Ole Miss this weekend. Ole Miss coming into town. Ole Miss is coming off of a sweep of LSU. They swept LSU this past weekend, which I know, we obviously lost our series to LSU 2-1. So I wanted to, before we get into the series, just talk about the common opponents. So Ole Miss has played some teams that we will play, that we haven't played, but looking at the teams that we've both already played, Ole Miss and Tennessee have both played LSU and Mississippi State. UT is 4-2 against those teams. So 2 losses, LSU, 1 win in that series, and then obviously the sweep Mississippi State. And then Ole Miss is 3-3. Against those teams. So Ole Miss got swept by Mississippi State and swept LSU. So knowing that, thinking about the common opponents, where are you at with this series? What are you thinking going into it, Nick? You're up.
Oh, we're going to win them all. No, I do think we're going to win this series. I think we might drop one, but I think we're going to win this series. Both teams are riding high. Another thing that's interesting to note, I was trying to both teams started off bad, and they've both obviously picked it up this last weekend. But I think Ole Miss has not been great on the road so far. I can't remember the specific stat. I had it pulled up earlier. They're 3-5 away from home, and they kind of struggle probably more than Tennessee with their rotation depth. So I think there's a real scenario where we win on Friday and then win on Sunday. So I'll go with that for my pick.
Nice. Jeff, what are you thinking going into the series?
It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what y'all think. So you go ahead, Mac.
Yeah, so I mean, I just at this point, I feel great about Tegan Kuhns on Friday. He's had, up and down, Landon Mack on Friday. He's had kind of an up and down year. But I think since he's got moved to that Friday slot, he's pitched really well. And so to think that we're throwing Landon Mack, and then when we get into a relief situation, we're throwing Cam Appenzler because God forbid Josh Elander goes away from that after he just saw success last weekend.
I'll lose it. I'll lose my ever loving
I can't
mind.
imagine a scenario where I can. If you're up 10 runs,
or if you're down to like let's say Mac for whatever reason has a bad day and they're teeing off on it, right? Then you don't. But assuming you have any kind of lead or that this game is tied.
Yeah, you're gonna see Mac, then you're gonna see Appenzler most likely, and so given that, I just can't pick Tennessee to lose on a Friday night. I don't think that we're gonna lose, and so once you win that one, I just feel really good about getting one more. I don't know if it's Saturday. I don't know if it's Sunday. I guess if I had to pick, I actually like Tennessee better on Saturday, just because of, as Nick kind of already said, with Mississippi State. Yeah, you still got Arvidsson, assuming Friday night goes the way you want it to. And so, I just feel like Coons and you got Mac and Appenzell on Friday, Coons and Arvidsson on Saturday. To me, it feels like those are the two games you win. And then Sunday is house money. If you lose because Ole Miss is just scrappy and refuses to get swept, and maybe the bats aren't hot on Sunday. Okay, it is what it is. But you go all in on Friday, you win that game. You go all in on Saturday. I really think Tennessee wins those two. And then I definitely think it's possible Tennessee sweeps Ole Miss this weekend. I guess making a prediction, I'm going to go with we lose on Sunday just to try and hedge my happiness a little bit. But I would not be shocked at all if Tennessee sweeps this weekend.
Yeah, they're both riding high. Something's got to give. They're coming to our place. They've not been great on the road. We just swept Mississippi State on the road, so Ole Miss can get wrecked.
Yeah.
So this question is going to reveal how little I have to contribute to this, but it seems like you're agreed that Mack and Appenzeller are your best two pitchers to shoot your biggest guns at winning Friday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why wouldn't Appenzeller start?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jeff. So I guess I would come at it two ways. So when you said Mac is your, your best arm on Friday, shooting your biggest guns.
Well, what I'm saying is, it sounds like they are the combo,
right?
So I'm not trying to gloss or glaze Mac as much as I'm like, if Appenzeller's your best pitcher, why isn't he the guy who sets the pace for the series? You know what I'm saying?
Right. So I think – so what I was going to say, what I think is I actually think Coons is your best pitcher.
Okay.
He has the highest ceiling. Yeah.
I think Coons is your objectively best pitcher. I just think he's kind of had a rocky start to the season. That's why Mac is in the Friday slot, and Mac has done great in that slot. So to answer your question, you can't start Appenzeller on Friday because Mac's thrown so well in that spot so far.
Okay.
And there's no reason to move him off that. You shouldn't start him Saturday because – and that is the slot where you could if you wanted to, but Coons has just done well enough, especially now that he's kind of got the pressure off of not being on Friday, that I just wouldn't want to mess with that. And then Blanco, honestly, sneaky, has maybe been your best pitcher.
He's been the most consistent.
Right. And so you don't want to mess. So I say all that to say Appenzeller, I think, provides more teeth in your actual outcome scenarios. Like he gives you more depth and more chances to win in a relief situation. I guess what I'm trying to say is this team has more quality starters on the roster than they do quality bullpen arms. And so moving Appenzeller out of the bullpen hurts your bullpen more than it helps your starting rotation, if that makes sense.
Yep,
yeah. So it's a don't fix what isn't broken. Like you found a formula.
A lot of that.
Just ride it.
Yeah, and this team's a little bit different. I think that's why Mac and I have talked about managing this team a little differently than what you would typically like to do. Because normally a guy's throwing, in this day and age in baseball, a guy's throwing 4 or 5 innings, and then you're going to see 2 or 3 different guys for the next several innings. And what we've been saying is you should see 4 guys the first 2 games. Like it's kind of old school baseball. It's like you want one guy to go as deep as he can, and then you want whoever's behind him to be a guy who can also throw a lot of pitches. So that's what's nice about Appenzeller is he can also throw a lot of pitches, and a lot of relievers can't do that. So if Mac has to come out in like the 4th, then you're like Appenzeller could take us the rest of the way.
Yeah. To that point, though, Jeff, I think had Coons continued to slide, or when they moved Mac to Friday and if it didn't work out well,
You would have
that's where I
seen
think
Appenzeller.
Appenzeller would have gotten the start. But maybe not before they moved Blanco too. They might have tried Blanco on a Friday or Saturday and then put Appy on the Sunday. I don't know exactly how that would have played out. Obviously, doesn't really matter right now because everyone's throwing pretty well. But Appenzeller's going to be your Friday night guy next year. I mean, I don't see a scenario where he's not. So right now, if I'm coaching him, what I'm encouraging him in is you're playing a huge role on this team. I know you want to be a starter. We want you to be a starter, but that's just going to have to be next year because you're helping this team the most right now coming out of the bullpen on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, he's key. He's with the other guys throwing the way they are, he's, like you said, he gives you more teeth. He's more important to the team right now doing what he's doing than he would be starting on any night.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and 1,000% defer to y'all. The thing that we have talked about is this team does better when they're juiced, when they've got something to be excited about. And he seems to be the singular player who comes out and you're like, we are riding this train. Yeah. And so, like, if you could give them that early on Friday and sort of let that snowball, as a guy who's like remembering the Tony V teams that did that to people, they get hot, they gun you down, they snowball. There's part of me that would like to see that again, where it's just a brash.
Yeah, there definitely were those Tennessee teams where, like, I mean, when Blake Tidwell or Elander went out there, if Tennessee scored like 2 runs in the first 3 innings, you were like, we're cooked. There's no chance we can score 3 runs on Chase Elander, right? Yeah. And like teams probably don't feel that way about Landon Mack, but so I get what you're saying, but I just think, I don't think it's a full rebuild, but I do think it's like a soft reset, and we just don't have that kind of firepower.
But I don't think it's off the table, Jeff. I mean, like, especially thinking about the Mississippi State series, like Mac got hit more against, and let's say he got hit productively more than he had in past weekends. Like, I think he gave up less hits, but Mississippi State was able to push runs across against Mac in a way that Mac hadn't given up runs in past series. And so if that trend were to continue as you're kind of coming into some of the more tougher series that you have on the schedule, it's possible that they say, hey, we're going to throw Appy on Friday night, because Appenzeller has been objectively the most dominant pitcher on the roster to this point. He just does not get hit. He does not walk people. I mean, he truly is just mowing people down.
It's unreal.
And so I think there's a chance that if Appenzeller continues to trend up and Mac, I won't say continues to trend down because I don't think he is, but maybe starts to just get hit a little more, give up some runs a little more, it's possible you see something happen there and then try to go to Appenzeller on Friday. Again, I'm just trying to think like Josh Elander. I think before you see them put Appenzeller in the starting role on Friday, they probably would try Coons again on Friday. I really think that's what they would do. Not that I necessarily agree with that, because I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, that I would love to just see the guy who's hot and mowing people down, just throw him out there inning 1 Friday night and let's see what happens.
Take their will to live. And
Exactly. But baseball is just one of those sports, where it's so finicky and people are super superstitious and you just don't want to mess with too much.
And like, there's the superstition part, and then there's like the legitimate part where like, there's a thin line between like where does the superstition and like the mental games come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Like pitching and hitting both are such mental games, and so like you could put Appenzeller out there on Friday and he could get tagged because it's just different. It's like you have a little bit of that in basketball. Like you've seen the guys, Jeff, that like they're struggling starting, but they're the best first guy off the bench you've ever seen. Like
like Lou Williams or something. Yeah, that's a huge thing too. I mean, because we can get into the details on that. We don't have to, but like, because it's all about like the warm up is different, right? How you prepare for the game is completely different compared to a starter to a bullpen pitcher. And so right now, it's like Max used to being a starter. He's doing a fine job at that. Appenzeller's so far in college used to being a reliever. He's doing fine in that role. So don't mess with the status quo.
Don't mess with the mojo.
Makes sense. I appreciate the explanation.
Just win.
Yeah. All right, well, guys, great episode. I'm looking forward to Tennessee getting a victory this weekend against Ole Miss. Nick, let them know where they can find us.
You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. If you find us on those places, please do, as Max says, like and subscribe, because we are just light years ahead of even our own coaching staff on baseball strategy. So, and you'll just feel a little bit better. Like Max said, you'll not feel like everything's so volatile all the time. You may even briefly forget that you ever got hurt, and you may feel like me, that you're like, we're just totally back. We're going to win every baseball game we ever play from here on out. So that's where you want to find us. And you want to also follow us on X at volatile_1998, where we post our episodes every Thursday. So that's where you can find us.
Yep. Well, remember, it's terminal, but it might not be.